You're now watching a clip from the Inspired by show. You can watch the full episode on our YouTube channel or listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure to head over there, leave us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed it, and follow the show. I ended up I was headhunted into another company, and I was made director of the global company when I was 24.
Wow.
And I remember I still remember getting my very first business card that said Chloe Bisson, director. And I remember the first thing I did was take a photo and send it to my parents. And I remember looking at it going, oh my God. And I was giving it out to everyone. And nobody gave a crap. No one cared what the company was. But I was like, I'm just so excited by this. And then when I was a director of that company, I realized I got sat at that chair, and it was about, massive pay rise, massive increase of responsibilities. And I loved it for about 2 months. And about 3 months in, I remember sitting at the desk going, what now? Because all I'd ever worked for was to be sat on that chair, in that seat, in that boardroom. And I was like, this isn't it. And then I went to the doctors because I wasn't feeling myself. And I honestly thought I was basically I'd had like a sick bug for a couple of days. Every morning I felt really sick. Every evening I felt fine. And I was like, this is really bizarre. And at first I thought, oh my God, am I pregnant? Because is it morning sickness? I was never sick. And then I went to the doctors just to get a stomach tablet or something to get whatever it was out. And she said, Chloe, I think you're clinically depressed. And honestly, I was sat there going, you what? And I still remember it like it was yesterday. My mum was with me because back then I didn't know my connection to my parents and how reliant I was on their emotions and their reactions. And so my mum came with me, and she told me this, and my mum said, yeah, I think you are as well. And I was sat there going, that's the reason she came with me, because I think she knew. And then when I spoke to the doctor, I turned around and went, you're absolutely wrong. I said, I'm the most positive driven person you've ever met. How can I be depressed? And I was so rude, and I was also so in denial. And then it was after that it was almost like that pulled a thread, and this whole image of myself that I painted in my head, the complete denial, the hole that I tried to cover over with so many layers, it just started to unravel.
What do you mean?
The reality hit a few days later. So she signed me off for 3 days. It was about to the end of the week. She said, Chloe, just take these 3 days. I can see you're a bit frustrated by it. I can see you're a bit upset by what I've shared. Take this few days, I'll sign you off, and we'll have a call on Friday. And she called me on Friday, and by that point, reality had hit. I was in tears. I was in pain. It was like someone had taken away the painkillers that I maybe I hadn't been on, but the emotional painkillers, yeah. And suddenly it was the reality hit. I was so depressed. I was so down. Physically couldn't move. I was in bed. I remember crying my eyes out at the smallest of things. And that's when I was like, ignorance was bliss. How have I not realized this much pain that I've been in? How have I not felt it? And then I started getting paranoid that, do I know my mind? Do I know myself? And how have I been lying to myself for, by that point it was 15 years.
How old were you at this point?
I was 25.
Well, you were literally asking yourself these questions.
Yeah.
That sounds like a scary place.
Yeah, it was. And I didn't know myself then, because at that point I was so unwell. By the time I'd actually accepted it, she signed me off for 6 months.
Wow.
She said, Chloe, this is going to take time.
So after the 3 days, you were meant to come back in. This was on a Friday. You had a phone call, and you were
gone.
Yeah.
Couldn't move. Physically couldn't move. And it was just horrific. It was one of the most painful experiences I've ever had in my life. It wasn't her telling me that I was depressed that was the painful bit. That was just the catalyst that made me have the realization. It was like she pulled that thread, and it was like this fake world, this fake me that I'd created came falling apart. And then it was that was like going from rock bottom every day, having to do something to just get back up. But because I was such a high achiever, I'd never had this huge realization before. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I quite literally ended up being off work. I had other stuff going on where my relationship had gone down the pan. I'd lost my home that I'd had. And it was just, everything came crumbling down around me.
Well, what was the trigger for that?
So just before that moment when I'd got my promotion, I was in a really good relationship, really positive relationship. We've been together for like 4 years, and we had bought our new house, 4-bedroom house. So everyone's like, oh, wow, like next steps engagement. And we were just on this beautiful journey. And I found out that he'd been unfaithful with a really good friend of mine, quite a lot. So that was the catalyst, because I think that moment of thinking I was really successful and him betraying me. And then obviously by that point, everyone found out, our friends, everyone would look at me like I was damaged. And so I pushed further. I had more of a need to succeed. I had more to prove. And then I think I pushed too hard. And that's when it all came down.
Wow. Well, so it was just kind of having these blinkers on, really just trying to block out the rest of the world and not really dealing with that pain. And that really kind of made you snap.
For the second time, because the first pain was my parent divorce. The second one was him being very unfaithful. Yeah. So it was like the second time, and I just kept fighting and fighting and pushing and pushing and pushing. And then I don't think I could push anymore.
Wow. So this 6 months, how were those 6 months? Or how did you cope with that?
Coping, I think I had coped quite well, but I had to be so patient with myself. Because I looked fine, and Jersey's a very small island, like any town really, I wanted to hide and stay in because I didn't want anyone to see me. Because I thought if they see me, they're going to think, well, why is she not at work? She looks fine. And it was a learning curve because my parents had never experienced me go through that. There was a tiny bit of mental illness in my family history, but not to this extent. My friends had no idea what I was going through. And so I remember one of my best friends coming around and saying, I expected you to be crying. Like, I didn't know what to expect. He's one of my closest friends, and he just didn't know what to expect. And he just looked at me and said, you look okay, but are you okay? And I was almost just empty. So every day, those 6 months was just like learning to walk again. That's the only way I can describe it. And not breaking down. And I remember some days it was like a win was just from getting from the bed to the couch. And then the next day it was like, right, I'm going to shower and then go on the couch. I didn't leave that flat for ages. And then the doctor called me and said, look, I think you need to get out. I think, you sound a bit better. Why don't you try going to the gym? And I remember thinking, and the gym, to paint a bit picture, was directly opposite my flat. I lived in a block of flats. The gym was in the building. So I didn't really ever, the risk of seeing someone, I think I'd cross a road and that was it. But I was terrified, and I only went to the gym when I knew everyone else would be at work, because I was just so embarrassed. And I just kept pushing, and every day was like a little step, until I started to feel normal again and started to feel it. Do you know what? It was a bit like a hunger. I started to feel hungry again. I was like, actually, I feel like my brain can actually be stimulated. But it took a really, really long time.
And what was that hunger?
It was a need of achieving, but for myself this time. It was like I wanted to prove that I wasn't just going to be lying in bed all day for the rest of my life. And I remember having a conversation with the doctors and wanting to go back to work. And she said to me, Chloe, I think you should take more time out. And I actually think maybe you should leave your job and just get a less stressful job or live on benefits. We can support you that way. Being 25 and hearing that after how high achieving I was that was where the hunger came from. I don't know to this day if she did that intentionally to think this is going to spark her or not, who knows? But I had that moment where I was like, nah, like I'm done. This is enough for me. Like 6 months sitting on my ass was enough. And I'd gone through so much. I'd learned so much about myself. And I thought, there's no way this experience is just for me to heal. Like other people have to benefit from this.
Wow.
And that's when I was just like, nah, I'm not. And I had a decision. I was at a crossroads. I was like, do I listen to her and just either not have a job at all, which was tempting to get paid and live on benefits in my flat in Jersey and just have an easy life? Or do I prove her wrong and do something more productive with my time? Because by that point, my job had pretty much gone. They had to plan recruiting other people. Me being out for 6 months, they couldn't survive. Yes. So I had to start from scratch. And that's when I realised that I had to make something out of this. And that's why I decided to start my own business. Wow. And just because I had nothing to lose at that point. Wow. It was like, I'm already at rock bottom.
Yeah.
Where else is it going to go? It's only going to go one way.
There's nowhere else to go, just forward, right?
Yeah.
Push